Welcome to the Queer Confidence Podcast, the podcast to help you become your most confident queer self. I'm your host, he, she, they, Coach Alex Ray, and I haven't always been this confident. In fact, I used to be super insecure. And through this show, I want to share with you what's worked for me, my clients, and my guests so that you can become more confident. Hello, unicorns! Welcome back! Today, I have another special guest for you as we continue this series on just discovering the sex industry and our bodies and just destigmatizing all this shit, you know? I'm really excited to introduce to you today Coach Nic. He is a sex coach, and he actually works with Davey Wavy on some of his projects, has written some porn scripts. Is that what it's called? Some plays? What do we call these?
We'll get into that.
Okay. Some storylines.
They're originally called scenarios.
Okay.
There's a scenario for each video, and then we flesh those out on location. So yeah,
I love it.
Not really scripts. I go so far as to call them scripts. But,
fair enough.
I got pretty detailed in what I wanted them to do and to get across. But yeah, so yeah, that's me.
Well, I love it. Great. We're going to have an awesome conversation today. It's going to be so fun. And we're going to just destigmatize a whole bunch of shit and really make sure like everyone leaves feeling like they can have a better connection with their body with a whole lot less shame, right? Something both of us.
I love that. I love just even hearing those words warms my heart. Yes. And yes, that's what I'm all about. Absolutely.
Yeah. And both of us having a background in religion has greatly influenced our sort of relationship with shame and how we love to help people work through it. So I'm thrilled for this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you're very welcome. And good to see you again.
So good to see you again, too. All right, let's hop in. I would love for you to introduce yourself, let everyone know like who the heck you are and what do you do? What is a sex coach, right?
It's a really, really long story, but I'll try and make it quick. I'm coming from having been born in California, raised just 36 miles up the coast in Oceanside, California. My family was Catholic. Actually, both sides of my family were Catholic. My father's nominally Catholic. They got their kids baptized and first communion and marriage, and that was kind of it. My mother's family was, and his family is Mexican. So I have relatives all over Mexico. My grandfather having been born in Zacatecas. My mother's family, however, was from French Canada, from New Brunswick, and they were a little bit more faithful Catholic. So after the divorce, when I was 5 or 6 years old, my brother and I were with my mom, and we were raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, and I think that's where it sort of began. Being in Catholic school and being with the rituals and the culture surrounding parochial institution and being taught by nuns, and the priests were always in and out of the classroom. And I've got to say that my Catholic rearing was really quite benign. I don't remember. I was never abused, sexually or physically, maybe a little bit emotionally. But I think back on it, was all pretty good, and it attracted me to be a priest. Mm-hmm. So perhaps the most surprising thing to your listeners may be that I was a priest for 16 years.
Yes.
From 1974 to 1990.
Wait, did you know that you were gay before you entered the priesthood?
Yeah, that's an interesting story too. Oh, I didn't bring my book upstairs. Of course, if this were video, so I'll just tell you the story. When I was 5 years old, my father came from a long line of artists, of visual artists. And so he dabbled as well, but his essential job was as a musician. He was a cocktail lounge artist on the Hammond organ for years and years and years. But he loved to draw and to sketch and to paint. And so he had this book on drawing the human figure. And at 4 or 5 years old, I would pull that book out of the bookcase and page through it. And I was just fascinated by the naked form of men, just transfixed. And this event happened. I took out some tracing paper, some India ink, and a quill pen, and I was tracing for myself one of those beautiful drawings of a nude man, because I wanted it for myself, right? Yeah. Well, I heard somebody come in the door, and this is before parochial schools. So I felt shame. I felt a little bit of shame. And so I shut the book, shoved it back in the library, and got rid of the art materials. And nobody knew the wiser, but I knew that I suspected that I dropped ink on that page and that it probably made a mess. But I didn't think about it for another 40 years when my father called me, needing to move from his little house to assisted living and asking me for help. And I said, sure, I'll help you. I drove up, to be there with him. And I was looking through his books, and there was the book.
Oh my
Drawing
goodness.
the Human Figure by Frederick Loomis. I'll never forget the name of the book. And I said, as I was leaving, I said, Dad, there are a couple of books here in your bookcase that I would like to borrow and read. He says, oh yeah, go ahead. So, to cover myself, I took out 3 or 4 other books, and of course the Human Figure book.
Right.
Driving back from Oceanside during rush hour, so the traffic isn't moving on 5, and I open the book up on the passenger seat, and I'm flipping through it, and by God, I come to page 50, and there is this gorgeous nude illustration with a big splotch of black ink on the page.
Hilarious.
I have physical proof that I was fascinated and interested and turned on by the male figure from earliest time. So yeah, I mean, a long way of answering your question. Yeah, I knew I was gay. I was always very honest about it with my spiritual directors, my confessors, and they said, well, the vow of celibacy means that you just cannot have sex, and so right. Whether you're straight or you're gay, that doesn't matter. You're just going to have to be like everybody else. Well, I not thinking that priests, by virtue of their training and their living situations, are often in the midst of a community of other men.
Right.
So it didn't help me at all. I was celibate for 3 months. It lasted that long. It was ridiculous. And it took me 16 years to figure out this is doing violence to my soul.
Yeah.
And, this whole story should be about God feeding my soul through Jesus and through my community and through my preaching and through the sacraments and all that. And in short, spirituality through that entire experience from childhood to leaving the priesthood finally in 1990 was a head trip. Mm-hmm. It was not a full body trip. And one of my discoveries in getting involved in somatic sex practice, somatic sex education, tantra, doing sexological bodywork, going through all of that training, was realizing that my sex, that my desires, my passions, all of my emotions, from the great ones to the shadow ones, are all an expression of that spirituality. They're all those they are all intangible qualities of my life that I can dip into whenever I want. And they are at their height when I am authentic and honest about my erotic desires.
Mm.
So masturbation, for instance, for me is a sacrament.
Mm.
It's very much about meditating beforehand and choosing an intention for the day and kickstarting, if you will, or igniting the intention of the day by engaging my body in that intention. What does it mean that my intention, for instance, today, my intention is to be the nurturer, to dip into my divine feminine.
Mm.
It just happened to be the intention that I drew this morning. And so with my body, it was just it wasn't a full, erotic moment. It was simply touching my genitals and my heart and starting that energetic breath, that dialogue that occurs between those two critical parts of my body.
Mm.
And that remind me, strangely enough, of my inner vulva, of my inner nurturer, my inner mother, my inner caregiver. And that was my intention for this conversation between the two of us, that intention would be a part of what we do. But that intention happens every morning with some kind of mindful erotic practice. It could be simply a touch and a breath like it was this morning. It could be a full-blown 45-minute to an hour and a half of edging, or a 10-minute play session with myself. It could be anything, but just dipping into my erotic self and reminding myself every damn day that my body is spirit. My spirit is body. There's this myth in Western culture that there's a separation between body and spirit, and it's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. You are whole. You are holy. You are sacred. And that means every fucking part of you, and every fucking part of the emotions and the desires that you feel in that body. Of course, you have to use them maturely and given boundaries and consent and all of that. But given that, and that you're, engaged with another human being who's capable of consent, that to me is beautiful, life-giving sex.
Wonderful. That was the monologue none of us knew we needed to really, really, truly have today. Ugh. So good. Okay. Let's rewind real quick. I really want to touch on kind of the divine feminine and masculine, because that's a conversation we've had on the podcast before, but I want to hear it from your perspective. I love what you're talking about with your inner vulva and take it away, my friend.
Oh man. Well, I'm very much in touch with my divine masculine, as most of us who grew up in the era that I grew up in, which is to say the 50s and 60s, we were raised to be quote unquote real men, and real men have goals and objectives, and everything about sex, in fact, could be whittled down to goals and objectives. And that's why we all feel so disappointed when at the end of a masturbation session or at the end of a sexual encounter, we don't come, and we think we're failures. Because we were raised to feel that way. We were raised to believe that, hook, line, and sinker. And again, there's so much bullshit that we have to slice through.
Yeah. Even that right there is a thing that's not even just unique to your generation. Like, yes, people my age are also like not realizing that the whole point of sex isn't just to ejaculate,
Yeah.
and that you can have that ejaculation and orgasm are not the same thing.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. That's one of my big things.
Yeah.
I love telling people, even in casual conversation, you do know that, that ejaculation and orgasm scientifically, biologically, anatomically are two very separate things. And I wish I'd known that when I was on an SSRI drug for mild depression for 7 years, because
Mm.
one of the side effects of the medicine was I couldn't come.
Mm.
It didn't have an effect on my erection,
Okay.
but it did have an effect on my ability to ejaculate. And it wasn't until maybe 5 or 6 years later, and I was getting into these studies, that I realized, oh my God, I could have been orgasming like crazy,
Right.
without ejaculating, and just having the most wonderful full body orgasms without bothering with the cleanup,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
the big show that everybody seems to expect. But we're getting a little bit off track.
We are. We are.
Uh,
We'll circle back.
yeah, the divine masculine. I mean, the point I wanted to make was because I was also a musician. I've got to say that I was a musician even before I was a person of quote unquote faith in the church, because I started piano lessons literally 70 years ago. I just turned 74. I was 4 years old when I started doing piano. So I read music before I read words. So I've been a musician all my life. I'm still an active pianist, concert pianist, vocal coach, opera educator. I worked at San Diego Opera for many, many years. And I'm a composer, and the company is going to be producing 3 of my one-act operas in April. So, I'm really coming into my own as a musician as well as a composer. But the shadow side of that was that at school, I didn't do all of the boy things that we were expected to do. Play baseball, be able to hit a ball, be able to catch a ball, without flinging my arms like a girl. I couldn't.
Same. Really never been one for all the sports.
Yeah. And that always made me feel left out of the male tribe.
Right.
Made me feel, and I was often castigated, not only by my classmates, but by teachers for playing with the girls. I spent all my time playing with the girls, and I really enjoyed being with the girls. And so I should have woken up much earlier than I did to the fact that I had what would be considered traditional role identification with women, and raised by a single mother for a very long time after the divorce. Many female influences. All my piano teachers were women. All the teachers in school, most of them were women, at least until I got into high school. So it wasn't really until this training as a somatic sex educator and sexological bodyworker that I was encouraged and driven to explore the divine feminine within myself. And I'll never forget this. I'm sorry. I like to go from story to story. Here's the story.
I like when you do the stories. So you go for it, my friend.
One of our very first exercises in the certification program was to prepare for a mindful erotic experience with ourselves. So in my mind, and I think in the minds of most of us and in our bodies, it was masturbation.
Mm-hmm.
But to surround yourself with clothing and articles that signaled both the masculine and the feminine to you.
Mm.
And I had to really think about it because I don't have a lot of women's clothes in my closet. But I did remember that I had a jabala, which is the traditional Moroccan outer garment that the men wear in Morocco. And it's the closest thing I had to a dress.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a caftan.
Okay.
Like a caftan. So I grabbed that and put it down. I grabbed an old pair of Levi's that I hadn't washed in a while so that they would smell really male, right?
Yeah.
And then I remembered that I had purchased a red pair of very sheer, silky underpants for a gag that I did at a Halloween party. So I got those out and pretended that they were women's panties.
There you go.
And so I've surrounded myself with these things, and the instruction was to take these pieces of clothing and rub them against my body, smell them, and just float from the masculine to the feminine in my erotic experience while I am self-pleasuring.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, up to that point, that was probably the hottest self-pleasure session I've ever had in my life. I get tingles. I'm almost getting emotional over it because it really came so clear to me that there's so much of the feminine in me that wants to come out, that wants to be seen, that wants to be heard. And so from that moment on, I began allowing space for that to happen. And it just came clearer and clearer to me when we had our residencies, where we would, all of the students who were studying on that certification track would get together in Canada, because the program is based in Victoria now. And all the other students were women. I was the only man in the room, and I was a little like, oh God, how is this going to be working? I was thinking, well, I would at least have one or two pairs of male genitals to be working on, because that's where I'm going to be practicing, is in the gay male community and queer community. But that's not how it worked out. All of my hands-on experience in both weeks of residency were on female bodies.
That is incredible.
And at the end of one of them, and I was very honest about, being open to discovering more about my divine feminine. We had a kind of a graduation ceremony, and they suggested that I have a father-daughter dance with my inner vulva.
Oh my God. Wait, tell us more. How do you have an inner father-daughter dance?
Well, we had a dance ritual to end our time together, and I danced alone. I had an oyster shell that they had gone down to the beach to find for me and gave me as a symbol of my inner feminine.
Ooh.
And so I danced with that at my heart, and again, making the connection between my heart and my cock, my hands at my perineum, and just moved through the room and danced literally with my inner feminine. And I often refer to her as my inner vulva because she's there, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful moment. It sounded kind of funny at first. I'll have a father-daughter dance with myself, but it made absolute sense. And of course, the other thing is that almost all of the women in the room were younger than me. They all were younger than me, except one faculty member who is, I think, about the same age as I am. So that kind of filled it out as well, because I felt like so many of them were we're daughters in spirit, if not
Mm.
sisters. So it was really wonderful, and to finally just acknowledge that in myself and realize that it's there and welcome it, not fight it, not be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, yeah, that's yeah. I really do feel the yin and the yang in myself, and the masculine supporting the feminine supporting the masculine. It's very real to me.
Oh my God, that's so fantastic. I love it. Okay. Oh, that was like an unplanned little journey there. I'm so glad we had it.
I'm sorry.
I,
Once we get started, it's like I can't. I try to self-edit myself so that I don't go on forever.
oh
But
no, you're fine.
I am a public speaker, so I like to tell stories and I like to go on a little bit, but I'll try to be good.
No, this is perfect. Also, this is how I do too. Like anytime I'm being interviewed, oh my God, it's like story after story, which I think is a great thing. Like we're natural storytellers and humans learn through story and experience so much better than like
Yeah.
here's the facts. Like, okay, thank you, but like
And those stories come with the emotions that happened when they occurred.
yeah.
And so, as I'm talking to you and these stories are coming out, that my whole body is filled with these sometimes conflicting emotions that I had, the shadow emotions that I felt on the baseball field when I was absolutely and totally useless, as
Mm.
opposed to the emotions of joy and love that I felt when I was dancing with my inner vulva. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm ping ponging from one amazing emotion to another, but I think that's I think that's where we're called to be as
Mm.
human beings. We weren't given these gifts for nothing.
Right.
So I don't understand the typical American approach. Maybe I should just broaden that a little bit to the typical Western approach of hiding those emotions and um, like covering a steaming pot with a
Mm.
metal lid and thinking that that's going to be okay for the rest of our lives, and not allowing it into your erotic life. That's perverse to me now.
Yeah.
That just seems so perverse to me. It's just wrong.
Mm.
So, yeah, spilling our guts like this, Alex, and being with those emotions that we experienced and those things when we experienced them, and just bringing them back, even the grief and the sorrow and the shadows. It's all part of it. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I hear this theme in what we're talking about specifically right now of integration of all parts of yourself being okay, being loved. Hey, there's that shame piece again, right? Like,
Yeah, but it's real.
mm-hmm. letting
It's there.
but letting go of the shame that separates us from ourselves and splits us up and hides part of ourselves from ourselves so that we don't have to experience what seems wrong. This is just being our whole dynamic, contradictory human selves.
Yeah, yeah. You're just the word shame conjures up for me. The one thing that I take away from Catholic school, at least Catholic grade school, was that the M word was never or rarely used. Masturbation.
Oh, I was like, the
There
M
was
word.
there
Got
was
it.
a euphemism for it. Do you know what the euphemism that they used officially when they were talking to us about masturbation?
Wait.
Self abuse.
Ooh.
Think about
Yikes.
that.
Yeah.
Self abuse. That's what I grew up with. Now, as I say, overall, the whole Catholic upbringing for me, it really was relatively benign, and I
Mhm.
thank the church for my education, which went right through my doctoral studies, paid for all of it. Great.
Yeah.
That's lovely. They appreciated education. I got a great, great basic education. The nuns that taught us were incredibly progressive. This is the 50s, remember. This is 1956 to 62. And they ware talking about Martin Luther King, and things that were
Wow.
happening in the South and racism and segregation. So I have a lot to thank them for. And still that lingering shame, that guilt about all things sex was one of the few things that got through, and that I still sometimes struggle to let go of. And that's what's become my mission as a sex coach for the LGBTQIA community. Mostly I work with gay men with aging issues, but I have, gay clients of many, many ages, different points in their life. But often the first thing that we have to deal with is confronting that lingering shame that might have been placed there simply by society. I'll have clients who say, well, I wasn't raised in religion, so I don't have any of that.
Ha.
But then,
No,
but
but you're
then
raised
it comes
here.
out. Yeah, it comes out because it's all through American society. The
Mhm.
shame about sex and the way we hide things about sex and the way we lie about sex and the way we treat it in advertising and in the commercial world and film. It's very rare that you see something as honest as that marvelous, what was that, the Emma Thompson film that came out last summer? Oh my gosh,
I don't know.
the name of it has escaped me, but it's so honest about an older woman after her husband has died, going to a gigolo, hiring a young man because she's got these desires and she doesn't know what to do with them and she doesn't know how. And all of the questions, I just wept for her because so much of, even though she was a straight woman going through this, it's a universal issue of how
Mhm.
do you deal with the shame and the fear and the guilt that we've been handed by culture, church, and society in
Mhm.
terms of sex. And just be authentic with your body's erotic self. Um, oh, I'm so sorry I can't remember, but I'm sure some of your listeners will be going, "Oh, I remember that." But
Yeah, they can Google
it's
it.
and it's so good, and it's so naked. It's so honest about this very issue and
Mhm.
these very problematic areas of our lives that should not be problems. They just
Yeah.
should not, right? Uh,
Preach. Okay. Another thing I wanted to make sure that we got to bring up here, and like this beautifully segues into it, is when we talked about orgasm and breath and sound, there's so much shame there that people have around like the right way to sound, the wrong way to sound, the right way to breathe, the wrong way to breathe, and it's very influenced by porn because most people are getting their impression of like, okay, this is porn equals correct way to have sexual pleasure.
yeah, which is another huge myth that it's wonderful to be able to saw through.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, so let's start hacking away at it.
well, consider all you guys listening out there the first time you started to experiment with your body
Mm.
and you were in a bedroom, perhaps shared with a sibling,
Hmm.
and you were down the hall or across the hall from your parents.
Hmm. You were
And
literally painting my childhood. Okay.
so it had to be quick.
Yep.
It had to be, above all, quiet,
Uh-huh.
right? So you couldn't make any noise, and you had to do it as rapidly as possible. And breathing wasn't even an issue. I mean, you were probably an upper chest breather anyway, because we all were. And, you didn't even think about breathing all the way down to your genitals or all the way down to your anus. But you were too concerned about, first of all, getting the pleasure. Second of all, hiding it from everybody. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I spend half of my time with clients, essentially getting them to remember that and then working backwards and saying, all right, if you breathed from your belly, like singers are taught to breathe, like
Mm-hmm.
athletes are taught to breathe, and if you went slowly and mindfully,
Mm-hmm.
and if you allowed your body to emit noise, to make sounds,
Mm-hmm.
they can be words. They can be a sigh on the exhalation of breath. It can just be simply, oh. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. Or I mean, whatever you do, or fuck yeah, which I consider my amen when I'm doing a body prayer. Uh, it's like, come on, be vocal about it, or use a
Yes.
mantra. My body is my home. I
Yep.
love this mantra. I love my body. My body is my home. And I simply
Mm-hmm.
repeat those two phrases because they also affirm what I believe about this body, that it is my home and that it's beautiful. I love my body. My body is my home. Not these four walls, this concrete, this nice kitchen, the living room. Okay, that's all lovely, but this is the home right here. And this is
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And taking time, being mindful about self pleasure and using affirmations like that to tell your body how beautiful it is, to tell your dick how beautiful it is, to thank it for the pleasure that it gives you, and to make a connection with your heart. Actually, by physically making the connection, you can be stroking and stroking both your heart and your cock at the same time. What a concept, right? And just making all this wonderful noise and writhing around the room. Now, of course, you have to find a place where you can do that without being interrupted, and turn off
Yes.
your electronic devices and forget that you've got a cell phone and a tablet and a
Right.
computer, and just lock yourself away and have fun and make juicy love with your own body. It's
Mm-hmm.
the first step, I think, in being an authentic lover to somebody else. I
Hmm.
really, really do. And this is something that is stressed by, whenever I try and remember the title of a book or a film, um, The Multi-Orgasmic Man
Mm.
uh, by Mantak Chia,
Okay.
Mantaka, Mantak Chia, like the chia seed. One of the points he makes is that your first step in being a great lover is being a great masturbator,
Hmm.
being a great self pleasurer. And I am a masturbation coach. And very often I find that clients really need that first before they start exploring, how to have great sex with a partner and what that means. And simply going to the basics. First of all, talking about touch. What does touch mean? What is the meaning of touch when there's a giver and a receiver? What is the meaning of touch when there's a taker and an allower?
Mm.
And talking about the four quadrants of the wheel of consent and boundaries, starting with that, and then moving towards touching yourself and finding pleasure, not just in your body, but turn that around. Can you touch your cheek and take pleasure in your fingers?
Mm.
I'll bet, Alex, that you can touch your cheek
Let me
and
do it
take
right now with you.
pleasure in your cheek.
Mm-hmm.
Switch that up in your body and take pleasure in your fingertips.
Mm. Yeah.
It's a different experience, right? And
Mm-hmm.
just playing with that, even for a few minutes with clients and helping them understand that touch means so many different things depending on context and depending on who. Even asking, I sometimes surprise a client by saying, first of all, before you enter self pleasure, ask your body for permission to touch.
Hmm.
And they just kind of wake up and, what?
Right. They're
I
like,
don't need to ask.
I want it.
I don't need to
Right.
ask my body for permission. Wait a minute, just for a moment, just think of your body as an outside body, as another body, and
Mm.
ask permission. I am sure the answer is going to be enthusiastically yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, you're going to begin to start to realize that your body is this beautiful thing that deserves respect. And I'm not talking about deserving respect in the biblical sense or in the religious sense, where that means we don't touch the private parts of our body and never show them. My God, no,
Right.
no. But when I approach my genitals, my cock, my balls, my asshole, my perineum, which has become one of my favorite things in the world, I approach it with respect, with great gratitude, with joy, and hope that it'll go on forever. And here I am, 74, and it's also working great. It's wonderful. I have a terrific sex life, and I have marvelous orgasms. And I think that can be true for most people, barring some kind of illness. And that, sadly, is one of the things that I do have to deal with with my clientele. Is what happens when you've got a disease or some kind of incapacity,
Mm.
like I did with depression,
Yeah.
and dealing with medication. And how do you overcome that? If I'd had a sex coach then who could have told me, well, let's reframe sex for you, let go of coming, and welcome in the orgasm. That would
Mm-hmm.
have been an incredible life lesson for me. Now that I know it, it's just making my self pleasure even more joyful. But knowing that and being able to share that with guys who aren't able to get erect or who aren't able, to ejaculate, you can still orgasm.
Yeah.
You can. It takes dedication. It does take patience and work. It's achievable. It is absolutely achievable. But you've got to love yourself and your body before you can do it.
Yeah. For sure. Um.
I
Okay.
guess I told you a little bit of what I do in,
But
in a client situation. These are
yeah,
kind of typical things that come up. So yeah.
I love it. Um. One last thing that I want to make sure we get a moment to touch on, uh, because it's so important to both of us, is the spiritual aspect of sex and sexual pleasure, and along with that, the spiritual shame that many of us have and are working through. So tell us about spirituality and sexuality and how they're kind of intertwined.
Well, I think everybody has to define spirituality for themselves. Uh,
Agreed.
I have let go of religion. And I think there's a difference between religious guilt, which, uh, I just don't want to have anything to do with, and think is false, and a giant lie to the billions of people who follow any kind of religion, and spirituality. Those two concepts need to be completely and utterly separated.
Mm-hmm.
For me, spirituality is very much connected with what I was talking about earlier, the realization that I am a whole person, and that those intangible things about myself, in other words, literally the things about myself that I cannot touch, but I experience thoroughly in my body, in what I would say both inside and outside. things like emotions, but things also like qualities, the quality of gentleness, the quality of affirmation, the quality of justice. Those are spiritual values, and they're all interwoven into this whole person that is encased in this flesh, that is in this beautiful home. So for me, spirituality is practicing anything that will make me aware and conscious of those things in my life and how important they are. So it could be just a moment of reflection, driving down the street, seeing a homeless person who's lying prone on the sidewalk and, obviously has no one in his life, and reflecting on what you just experienced and simply seeing that, just having that scene be visible to you. What does that mean to you? That's a spiritual exercise. Reading a book and coming across a beautiful phrase and just taking a moment to reflect on it. And does it have any meaning for you? It must have meaning because I stopped to read it. It was so beautiful. And just breathing into that. Music. Oh my God. How can I be a musician, a composer, and not talk about the spiritual qualities of music? Going to a concert or an opera or a symphony or, oh my God, this summer at Summerfest, the La Jolla Music Society, these intimate programs of chamber music, and the many, many, many moments of spiritual connection that I felt with the performers and with myself, with my heart. Now, it's not a huge leap to bring my erotic desires into that practice. Especially now that for me, mindful erotic practice is just that. It's mindful. It's slow. I take time to do it. And I reflect before I do it so that I already, it's my morning meditation. I choose a tarot card. It makes a suggestion to me about what intention my day might be. Then I journal about it, meditate about it, and then I begin my erotic practice. So that's my physical practice, my self-pleasure comes directly out of that meditative state. So I'm already there, in what I would consider a state where my body is open to all of those qualities that I don't think about every day while I'm walking around grocery shopping or doing my errands or whatever, but that I do take the time to pay attention to in this moment. And I bring them into the self-pleasure. So for me, that's how deep the connection between spirituality and sexuality is. I cannot divide it. I'll tell you, it's made it problematic to have authentic, mindful sex with another person. So
what do you mean?
choose, because they're not necessarily into that when they come over to my house for sex.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sit there and teach them for 45 minutes before we have sex.
Right. So you're like, I'll be taking a fee for this. Thank you.
Yeah.
They just had to work.
I've kind of let go of the whole hookup culture. But I've been very choosy about the people that I will have sex with. I'm more of a side now than a top or a bottom. So I'm open to an awful lot of other things, and I will let them know before they arrive that I intend to have a mindful journey with them
Mm.
And I invite them to be part of that. If they're not into that, fine, go your way. No hard feelings. And I've been surprised about the number of men and the quality of guys who have wanted to have that kind of experience, and it's been really lovely. So
I mean, the
hookups may not be a thing, but when I do have sex with another man, it's just it. There are openings now that I make it so easy. It's more of an intimate connection. It's not, slam wham goodbye. I've got an appointment, and
yeah,
can't spend any time here. No, 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 no. We're
yeah,
gonna Afterwards, we're gonna savor this. We're gonna love this.
yeah,
Um, and damn it, to sort of hook into what you do, it's taken a lifetime of building sexual confidence for me to be able to do this.
yeah.
So our worlds are not unrelated, Alex. I think they're
Oh,
very,
they're very related.
very related. And I was just thinking about that as I was speaking about, being confident about inviting somebody into my home for a sexual encounter, and not being afraid to involve them in some kind of intimate process, that it's going to be more than just physical.
Yeah,
Uh, it's just got to be that for me now.
yeah. And the fun thing too, to tie this in with last week's episode with Davey, like what he's doing and what you're helping him with Himeros is like, it's just clear to me that there are many more people than maybe like society makes obvious, because of what the media and everything portrays, but like there are actually a significant number of people, humans all over the planet, including queer plus men, that like you have evidence of, that you've interacted with, that are part of Himeros and are subscribing,
Oh
are
yeah, yeah,
are models for the videos, right? Who are interested in having these more mindful practices, and I think it's just
yeah,
such a wonderful reminder to not shame ourselves for the desires that we have that we think are too much or too deep or too different. There
yeah.
there are humans. If you have a desire, there are several other humans on the planet with
Oh
that
yes,
same desire.
oh
We are
yes,
we are so
absolutely.
much less unique than we like to think.
Yeah,
We
so
are all
true.
unique, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hear you. And I can't let us finish without referring to Davey and all the wonderful work he's doing. We didn't talk about it at all, but I do want to say that
yeah,
my work with Himeros and with Davey Wavy, with those models, was the most professional, the most uh, wonderful, beautiful experience that I think I've had in a long, long time. Certainly the most wonderful on camera uh, um, experience that I've ever had, a video shoot. I mean, and I've been involved in a lot of them, having had my own video podcast, having had my own program on UCSD TV for a number of years. These guys are great, and Davey is just the best, the best, the best. I'll be working with him again in October with another group of models, and I'm really looking forward to it.
so neat,
Yeah,
so
it's great.
cool. I love it. Thank you again, Nick, so much for being here, for sharing your amazing wisdom on
You're
self
welcome.
pleasure with us. Like, it really does all start here. Yeah, thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, y'all. I'll see you next week as this series continues. Until then, have a wonderful week. Oh my god, y'all. We almost left and totally forgot. Hello. Y'all want to do some work with Nick. So, Nick, where can everyone find you?
My website is mindfulpleasurepractice.com. It's a mouthful, I know. I'm sorry. So I'll repeat it. mindfulpleasurepractice.com.
Beautiful. Okay, and that's where they can find all your resources. They could sign up to work with you, and
Yeah. Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And
and I'm right here in San Diego.
Yes. Yes. So if you all are local, hello.
Yeah.
Yes. We can meet up and have a threesome. I mean,
There you go.
just
I'm
kidding.
up
I'm
for
currently in a closed relationship, but not a sexual threesome. We can have a threesome lunch. How about that? We can
There
do
you go.
that. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. And as always, y'all, we will have all of that linked up in the show notes for you. So you don't even need to remember it. Just go down and click it and you can get started with Nic. So Nic, once again, thank you for being here and thank you for sharing your wisdom, your insight with us today. Just so wonderful.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, y'all. For real this time. I'll see you next week. If you enjoyed this episode, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend so they too can become more confident. You can also help more people find the show by leaving a 5-star review wherever you listen. And if you want to become a more confident queer with support from yours truly, head to coachalexray.com or use the link down in the show notes. I'm looking forward to working with you.